welcome back to Interbanks Legal Services. I'm Sarah Beth Withers. I'm the president and principal attorney. And today we have a special guest with us. We have Jennifer Bennington of the law offices of Beaman and Bennington in Wilson, North Carolina. And we're going to talk about small business bankruptcies today. So Jennifer, welcome. Thank you for coming and talking today with us.
Thank you very much.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what areas of law you practice?
Sure. So I am with a small firm, Beaman and Bennington in Wilson. We practice a lot of bankruptcy law. We represent Chapter 7 debtors, Chapter 13 debtors, Chapter 12 debtors, Chapter 11 debtors. We also represent creditors in each of those cases, types of cases as well. We also, Mr. Beaman in my office is a Chapter 7 trustee. And then I was recently put on the panel to be a Chapter 5, Chapter 11, I guess, trustee for some of these small business cases that are now getting filed at this point. Yeah. We do other areas of law, but I am a certified specialist in business and consumer bankruptcy. So that is one of the primary focuses I have.
Yeah, that's why we wanted to talk to you today. Yeah. So the topic today is small business, which is great because, you know, you're a trustee. Can you tell us a little bit about the difference between small business bankruptcy, which is under Chapter 11, versus a business filing Chapter 7 bankruptcy?
So the biggest difference, 7 is oftentimes called a liquidation. And for a company, it really is. Now, in the course of an individual, that may not necessarily be the case in a Chapter 7. But if a company goes into a Chapter 7, they are liquidating. So yeah. A trustee would get appointed and they would sell off any assets the company had, and they would disperse those monies to how the court told them to pay those monies.
Right.
In the course of a Chapter 11, whether that's a typical Chapter 11 or it falls within this small business piece of it, that in most situations is a chance for the debtor to reorganize. So restructure some debts, keep some things, get rid of some things, and in some regards, discharge or get rid of some of those debts. But it is a mechanism in which to keep going. Now, let me be very clear, not everybody that files a Chapter 11 keeps their business going. Some of them may choose to wind down through a Chapter 11, but the primary focus is a reorganization in most Chapter 11 business cases.
Yeah. So if a small business came to you, and how do you help them decide if they should file a 7 and just liquidate and close up shop, or file an 11 and try and keep it going?
Is it bad to say it depends?
Yeah. That's okay. Yeah.
So it does depend. You've got to look at, my first question to my clients is generally, what do you want to happen? I've had some that say, I'm tired, I'm older, I just want to wind things down, I want to enjoy my retirement, or I want to go do something else.
Yeah. Those
cases, then we may start looking at, one, do they need to file bankruptcy at all? Because a lot of times, if that's what you want to do, you may be able to do that outside of a Chapter 7.
Yeah.
Just wind down the business.
Yeah.
And I've helped plenty of clients do that. If there's some dicey issues, some questions about who owns liens, or you just want to wash your hands of it all and you want somebody else handling the dirty work, then maybe a Chapter 7 is an option. If they say, I really think we can make this work, I've fallen on some hard times, I got to play some catch up, I can't pay these unsecured creditors, but I can keep focusing on my secured and I can get cash flow back, then in that situation, we're probably going to look to see whether a Chapter 11 would work for them. But that really, you've got to look first, I think, at the intent, and then at whether it's practical. So we first look at what they want, and then we look at whether it's feasible.
Yeah, like if someone's put their blood, sweat, and tears into a business and they just love it, but maybe it's not practical to to try and file an 11. I mean, maybe it's just the money's not going to be there. And yeah.
So, I mean, you do have to look at that, but I think but the first intent is you need to know what everybody wants first.
Yep.
And then see if it's reasonable at that point in time. And it may not be.
Yeah. So if someone were to come in and see an attorney about a small business bankruptcy, what is something they could expect? Like, what does the process look like?
Well, and I can pretty much only speak for my office because I know that Chapter 11s, I mean, if you think of Chapter 11, you're having companies, I mean, huge, J. Crew was filing Chapter 11, and then you got mom and pop filing Chapter 11. Yep. So there is a broad spectrum here. So that's one of the first things I would tell people is if they're going to talk to somebody, they need, or I would strongly urge them to have their financials for the last 12 months. What does their cash flow look like? What expenses do they have? What assets do they have? And when I say they, I mean the company. So keep in mind throughout this, when a company files bankruptcy, that doesn't mean the individual is necessarily filing.
Right.
And I know in small mom and pop places, the lines are often blurred.
They are. Yes.
And so I think being upfront with your attorney about that is one of the most important things, to show them how the cash flow was working. And then our recommendation is definitely going to be, we need to separate that out going forward. But having the financials, knowing what the company, owes, knowing if you've got documentation, if you have those contracts, if you have those written leases, bring all of as much of that together, because every case is going to be so specific that the more you can gather to begin with, the more detailed of a plan and answers you can get at that initial consultation.
Yeah, and that's what we tell our clients too, is, if you're going to come in for a consultation, come prepared, bring your tax returns, a business would be separate than a personal. We normally say bring your, pay stubs, but you could bring your profit and loss or your management reports, your contracts, your lease. Those are really important things to help decide, is what I'm hearing. Yeah.
Yes. And sometimes really small businesses, and I deal with farmers too, and I love my farmers. I do. But they're not the best business record people.
They're not.
They are great at what they do. But sometimes it's even, bring your check registry. Let me see who you're paying.
Your ledger.
Literally. So I'm not expecting everybody that walks in my office to have pretty, CPA generated profit loss statements. No. That's not what I'm looking for. But there has to be some concept and some basis for cash flow and assets.
In and out. Yep. Yeah. Yeah, we tell people that too, because we have a lot of sole proprietors that come see us and they don't have CPA records. They don't use QuickBooks, but they've got, a ledger. They can bring in their checkbook register and we can see what's being deposited and what's, being paid out. Yeah. So we kind of hit on this just a second ago, but sometimes the lines are a little blurred between mom and pop, the owners, and the business. So I know that oftentimes you see personal guarantees signed, which means that the person is also responsible for that business debt. So if you have a company that has these personal guarantees, do you guys also evaluate for personal bankruptcies in tandem with the business bankruptcy?
I think I'm going to say this a lot. It depends. Yes, we're going to consider it. But keep in mind, too, that our courts don't generally like the same firm representing an owner that represents the business, at least at the same time.
Right.
So if the individuals had to file personally, whether that be a 7 or a 13 or possibly 11, depending on their own debt limits.
Yeah.
Oftentimes what you will see attorneys do is file for the business first and see if you can get the creditors on board globally. Yeah. So maybe the individuals wouldn't have to file. If that's not possible, then what my office will often do is refer that individual to another law firm to handle their personal. Not that we haven't assessed the situation, but oftentimes in those blurred areas, that individual may have paid money to the company, the individual may have taken money from the company, there may be debts between the company and the individual. And you just, I as an attorney cannot represent, as when I clerked, I think it was Judge Leonard that said, you can't represent both sides of the V. So you can't represent the plaintiff and a defendant in a case. It doesn't work that way. And so for those kind of cases, we recognize the blending or the blurring, but we also need to make sure that if one of them files, that you separate them out and focus on, for me, focus on which one needs to file first to see if the other one does need to file.
Right. Yeah. That's what we see often too. We would send someone else if they have a business to another attorney and represent them personally. Yeah. So let's just say that I owned a business and due to COVID, my business is really hurting. There is just no income coming in. My debts are mounting. Are there any tips that you have that would help our listeners decide if they should take out these loans that they keep hearing about, like the economic injury disaster loan or some other loan, to either bring on a more debt to help pay their bills right now versus filing for a bankruptcy or just dissolving? Do you have any tips for helping them decide?
Well, I never want to encourage anybody to take on more loans. Let me be very clear on that piece of it. And I'm always hesitant when somebody's coming to me in financial situations to advise them to take on more loans. I mean, if they can't pay what they've got, my concern is them taking on more. Now, with that said, there are some of these, and I'm not going to even hold myself out as remotely knowing all of them, but there are some of these quote unquote loans that may not have to be repaid at the end. So that is one option. Obviously, consider it. If that's something that you might qualify for, look at that. What I would definitely not advise somebody in, unless it was a very fact-specific case, is to take on high-interest loans. There is a lot of, I'm going to label it as predatory lending. It may not necessarily fall under that statute right now, but there are a lot of these places that offer you very quick, easy money, and agree that you will sign off basically on things from now to the end of time. You know, the interest rates on those are having a huge problem with ever being able to repay that. Additionally, a lot of those places get access to bank accounts, can take daily draws. Those are all things I really would prefer somebody not doing, because it to me, I haven't, and given I see the non-successful ones, so understand that, but a lot of times it creates more fees and more, problems than had they really looked at potentially maybe filing. Now, one of the biggest things, and I know you've seen this too with just individuals, is timing of filing is very, very important in cases. And I think extremely so when you're dealing with small businesses. Small businesses in the course of bankruptcies have very set timeframes of filing, when plans have to be done, those kind of things. So oftentimes I may not recommend somebody filing this month. Maybe you wait a month when you know things are picking back up. Now, that may not be the case, but I think you've got to talk to somebody to look at the individual facts to see about the timing. But as far as actually incurring a bunch of debt, that kind of thing, I'm generally not a fan of it unless you really talk to an attorney or a financial person, and you really see a way out. Legitimately, you got a government loan, whatever it is, that might be feasible, but anything else, I would really talk to somebody first, before taking on that extra amount. And please look at the interest rates.
Yeah, I've seen some at like 38% interest. I mean, that's a predator. I mean, it may not fit under predatory lending statutes, but 38% interest is insane. I mean, it's too much. Yeah, so we usually say, there's no strings attached to go speak to a bankruptcy attorney. And if you are struggling to pay these bills, whether you be a business or a person, an individual, it doesn't hurt to just go sit down and do a financial health checkup with a bankruptcy attorney and see if it's maybe an option you should consider.
Yeah. And I think I would say that's true. I will say, I mean, every case is different and every attorney's different. I don't know how your office works. I mean, our office often does, initial consultations for no charge for individuals and maybe a nominal for bankruptcy Chapter 11 cases. It just depends on the situation. Some firms do charge. And so I would definitely, call around, ask people, see what their process is. Right now, a lot of people are doing them telephonically. So that's another potential option. And the other thing I would encourage people, when you call around, don't just look within your town. The Eastern District is, there's courts in Greenville, Raleigh, New Bern, Wilmington. And so I think we get very focused on, oh my gosh, I need a Wilson attorney. Well, that Wilson attorney travels to, Greenville and Raleigh and, Fayetteville. So I think especially when you're talking about businesses, it's not necessarily one that you need to have right down the street. That's just, it needs to be more somebody that knows the business realm, not necessarily that's local.
Yeah. And I think sometimes I see this often where someone will go see an attorney and they actually don't really get along with that attorney, but they don't go for they don't do another consultation. So they just hire, it's sort of like buying the first car on site instead of doing your homework a little bit and maybe testing out a couple different, so I always say, if you have a consultation and it's free, then there's no harm in doing another consultation with someone else that maybe you might have not to say chemistry with, but maybe you might have a better working relationship with.
There's a reason I think that I've gotten people have come in and said, hey, I talked to somebody 6 months ago. It really didn't rub me the right way, but I really think I got to do something now. And I'm sure that there's been people that have come in my office and gone somewhere else too. And that's, I think you've got to have a good working relationship. And Chapter 11, which, majority of businesses would fall under. Now, you do have a Chapter 12, which is a farming aspect or fisherman, but either, whether you're talking 11 or 12, they are so time intensive.
Yeah.
You're in it for a period of time. You really want to be able to get along with your attorney.
This person's going to be in your life for a while and they're going to be in the nitty gritty and know all the details of your finances. It should be somebody you trust.
Yes. And so, and I think that, some personalities, you might just mesh better with somebody. So call around, talk to people. You don't necessarily have to take the first one, that you talk to. And I think it's very important to know that attorneys all have different opinions. And so my take on a case may not be your take on a case. That doesn't mean either one of us is right or wrong. But I think that it's important that you're comfortable as the client with the direction that your attorney is thinking that case is going to take.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Yeah. So do you have any other pointers for small businesses right now?
This is a time I don't think anybody has seen. So it's hard to say what's going to come, but I do truly believe there is going to be a need for bankruptcy for more people than normal. Yeah. Whether that's going to be 7 liquidations, whether that's going to be 13s for individuals, or whether it's going to be, 11s and 12s for the farmers and the companies at this point. So I really want to encourage people to look at options and not be completely put off by the word bankruptcy. Because I think that is a word that people get scared by, and they don't understand that it's not a death sentence.
No, yeah.
In that it really is a good resource in certain cases, that can really help people that have put the sweat and the tears and the years into businesses continue those businesses instead of shutting their doors. So that's not going to be the answer for everybody, but I think it's something that is a resource that should be explored before you just keep trying to grind it out, on your own, or you just close up because you just don't think there's options.
Right. Yeah. To explore that option, to see if it's right for your business. It may not be, but it's an option and a tool available if needed.
And it doesn't have the stigma that it used to. I mean, every day I open my emails and there's more companies, big companies filing.
Lord and Taylor, JCPenney, Toys R Us. I mean, it's every day.
And so I feel like, I don't know about you, but I feel like when people walk in my office, they have this stigma associated with bankruptcy, and that's just not, I think that's something that is changing. There's not that. It's more of a mechanism and an option out there to keep your business going.
Right. Yeah. To reorganize the current debt situation into something more manageable to help keep the business going. Yeah.
Yep.
So thank you so much for joining us today. It's been really enlightening. For those of you out there, Interbanks Legal does not practice small business bankruptcy. We do not practice Chapter 11 and Chapter 12, but we have several really good resources if you need a referral. And Jennifer's contact is going to be here in this post because we'd love for you to reach out to Jennifer. And if you have questions, we are always here. We do practice personal bankruptcies, 7 and 13, and you can contact us at our website at ibxlegal.org. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you very much.